Good evening, YouTube. Welcome back to my channel. I'd like to do a very quick video, hopefully quick, about the first thing I've ever bought from Vinegar Syndrome. Okay, Vinegar Syndrome. Hear a lot of people talking about this boutique label. First thing I've ever wanted to buy from them is Flesh and Fantasy. This is a 1943 film released at Universal, and I had never seen it before last night. Came in the mail yesterday. Watched it, and I watched it a second time tonight with the commentary, and they did a beautiful job on this. Nice slipcase for all of you slipcase freaks. Okay, I believe it's the first time it's ever been put out on Blu-ray. I think. Here's the back. Nice artwork though. And on the inside we have a little bit more artwork on the disc. Turn that around for you here. Oh, it doesn't matter. Okay. And also an alternate cover, which I understand is pretty common with Vinegar Syndrome, right? You take this from one of the posters for the film. So you can see all the big stars we have in Flesh and Fantasy. We have Charles Boyer, Barbara Stanwyck, Edward G. Robinson, Betty Field, Robert Cummings, Robert Benchley, Thomas Mitchell, Charles Winninger, Anna Lee, and also not listed here, we also have Dame May Whitty, who was in The Lady Vanishes. So great cast of actors, and it's an anthology film, 3 parts, and it's difficult to classify. It's not really a horror film, although it is reviewed extensively in this wonderful book all about the Universal horror films. And very dark imagery, very much an A picture at Universal. And it sort of stands apart from the other horror films that they were making in the 1940s at Universal, all of which are wonderful, and I love every single one of them. But I think that Flesh and Fantasy just kind of stands up a little bit above those films. And kind of fairy tale imagery, very psychological, but just beautiful, beautiful to look at. And I don't want to tell you too much about any of it because I want you to pick this up and see it without any expectations other than you're going to be seeing a really engrossing picture. These stories don't necessarily connect with each other. They all have different themes, and yeah, I just really can't say enough good things about it. So very happy that I finally got this after all these years. I've been hearing about this film for decades, reading about it, and never getting around to seeing it. So some of the features on the disc. It's directed by a French director named Julien Duvivier, whose career is incredibly prolific, goes all the way back to the year 1919. And at different times in his career, he had come to America, worked in this country, and then went back to France. And he also co-produced the film along with Charles Boyer. Okay, so we have a commentary by film historian and author Barry Forshaw, and also with him is film critic and author Kim Newman. And I love Kim Newman. I've listened to some of his commentaries and interviews and read some of his articles. The guy is fantastic. These two guys, they bounce off of each other, interrupt each other constantly, but it's not a battle. They are having a great time, and they're so excited about the movie they just can't shut up. And it's one of the best commentaries I've heard in a long, long time. So very, very enjoyable and filled with a lot of great information. A lot of stuff that I didn't know about different actors, the director, all this stuff. So there's also a terrific documentary. It's called Fate News, not Fake News, Fate News, or The Dark World of Julien Duvivier. And this is conducted by French film director Christophe Gans, G-A-N-S, and it's in French with subtitles. He talks extensively about this man's career and also about Flesh and Fantasy. Terrific information. And I didn't realize that I've only seen 2 films from this man's filmography. Well, 3 now with Flesh and Fantasy. But I saw one of his American films from 1938. He did a version of Marie Antoinette starring Norma Shearer, so that was at MGM. And I also have this film that he made in 1962 called The Burning Court. He was still making films in the 1960s. He passed away in 1967. So this is one of the last things that he did. This is not really a horror film. Again, it's kind of difficult to classify. Um, a dark mystery based on a story or a novel by John Dixon Carr. This is a French-German production, and a lot of very dark, creepy imagery, and very much worth seeing. I got this from Sinister Cinema. They have two versions of the film. One is in English with no subtitles, and that's in full screen. Well, of course, if it's a subtitles, it is in English. It's dubbed in English, and the imagery is not terrific. The other one is a letterbox version with English subtitles, and I believe the language is German. It may be French. I can't remember now, but that is beautiful to look at. So they did a good job with that. Absolutely worth seeing. Okay, so let's see. They had two different cinematographers on Flesh and Fantasy. It started out with Stanley Cortez, who's very well known. He's the guy who did The Night of the Hunter, and incredibly good cinematographer. But something happened between Stanley Cortez and the director, and they brought in another well-known director named Paul Ivano. Okay, so anyway, that's I don't know a lot about Paul Ivano, but one of the most fascinating things about Flesh and Fantasy is what's missing, because there was a fourth part to the anthology, and it was going to be the first one to introduce the film, and it was a 33-minute sort of a fairy tale, dark fairy tale. I don't know a lot about it because I've never seen it, but it was sort of a dark takeoff on Snow White. Okay, there's a young contract player, an actress at Universal named Gloria Jean, and she was 17 years old at the time, and she was brought to Universal in 1939 when she was 14. She was a child prodigy opera singer, beautiful voice, and they groomed her to be sort of another Deanna Durbin, who was also a child prodigy, brought to Universal at the age of 15 when in 1936. She became a star overnight, the biggest star at Universal until she left the studio in 1948. And she was getting a little bit older in 1939, so they thought maybe they could strike gold twice, and they found Gloria Jean, and her real name was Gloria Jean Schoonover. Might have been pronounced Schoonover, I'm not sure, S-C-H. But so they started making films with her. She worked with Bing Crosby. She worked with W.C. Fields in a film called Never Give a Sucker an Even Break, which is a classic. And she was doing pretty well. And they put her in this film, in this Flesh and Fantasy, which really could have put her over as a major star. But it was cut out after the previews, before the general release in 1943. And a lot of speculation about why they decided to cut it. Could the studio have thought the film was just too long? Could it be that they didn't think that Gloria Jean and her co-star in this segment, a gentleman named Alan Curtis, a very good-looking young actor who had been in High Sierra with Humphrey Bogart, he was slowly building up a reputation as a good actor, that they were not as big a stars as Barbara Stanwyck and Charles Boyer, Edward G. Robinson, which is true. And it wouldn't seem balanced somehow. So is that why they cut it? Or perhaps, as I think it was the man in Fate News documentary said, that one rumor that has come out of this time from the Universal is that Deanna Durbin may have gone to the executives at Universal and asked that this segment be cut out of that film because she didn't want Gloria Jean to become a big star and that be in real competition with her. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if I believe that. I'm not sure that, number one, Gloria Jean, Deanna Durbin had that much power at Universal. And I also don't want to believe that she was that kind of a vindictive bitch. So that's just another possibility. But anyways, it's a real shame because after this, Gloria Jean's career went into a decline. They did release that footage a year later. They put another 30-some minutes of footage, new footage, with it, and they released it as a B film called Destiny, which you can see the trailer of Destiny on this disc. They played the trailer for Flesh and Fantasy, followed by the trailer for Destiny, which I've never seen the film. I guess it's available in public domain. It would have been nice if they had found a way to put it in this package, do a little remastering work on it, because I would love to see it. They also talk about Destiny in the Universal Horror book, and they get a lot of information from Gloria Jean, who only died just a few years ago, and it's kind of a shame because it it really did kind of put her career into a decline, and she was let go by Universal about a year later. So it's very sad. But I would love to see Destiny sometime. I guess a lot of people are amazed that they would cut out that segment instead of the third one, which was with Charles Boyer and Barbara Stanwyck, which a lot of people feel is the weakest of the three that were left in. But of course, if Charles Boyer was the co-producer, they weren't going to cut that out. So anyway, speculation. Uh, Whichever is true, I still recommend Flesh and Fantasy. Absolutely. And if you can find a copy of Destiny somewhere, you might want to pick that up as well. Comments are welcome. Let me know if you've ever seen this. All right. Good night.